This video is to cover the use of the combination square, which is really our main measuring device in metal fabrication. You might want to think of it as like, a knight has a sword and your cowboy has a 6-gun. This is the equivalent for us in metal fabrication, and this is the combination square. This one has the regular head and then the centering head, which we'll go through use of. Now, this is the one that we have in the labs, and your commonly available combination square that you can get at almost any hardware store of your choice. And it's adequate, though why would you want to use a better one? So these are fairly inexpensive, as enough to be probably disposable. So they do have a place. They're good to use in areas of working where there's a great likelihood that this may be damaged or destroyed, say around a lot of intensive metal cutting or welding activity, or around a lot of tools or machinery that could damage it. You may want to have a cheap one. And this is made of cast aluminum right over here, and this is just some, I guess, chrome-plated steel, I guess. So the aluminum is soft, prone to scratching, so easily scratched when rubbing against steel. This is not rust-proof and also quite soft, and the markings are painted. So these can scratch off quite easily, and sometimes solvents can actually remove them. If you're cleaning, it can take it right off. So those are kind of the downsides here. It does have a bubble level, quite vulnerable here. As you can see, there's nothing protecting it over here at all. Most squares do come with a small scribe in the end. Now this is really intended for woodworking. These are not hardened and are completely useless on metal. So most of the times these go missing. You're not going to miss it in metalworking. Nobody ever uses it. Now this is a professional combination square. Now this one has a forged steel head, which means it's extremely hard, very, very durable. It's also precision ground on every single face, so that every face is exactly 90 degrees. That's very important. The bubble level is protected here, so if any impact, it's not going to destroy it. My scribe has been missing years ago. Now the rule is hardened ground polished stainless steel, which means it will not rust, and the markings are engraved quite deeply. So I actually cleaned this earlier by using a piece of Scotch-Brite to take off any dirt on the surface and bring it back to a nice polished surface, and it will not remove the marking. So even if you scratch it or get solvent on it, it's not going to remove the markings, which is very important. Since you can polish it up again, you can make it very visible in low light. So let's take a look at the rule here. Okay, you'll see this one says 8 on the end, which means this is divided into eighths. Now this side over here is divided into 16ths right here. That's the smallest division. Okay, if we turn it over here, you're going to find 1 divided into 32nds, and additionally you see tiny little numbers right there: 4, 8, 12, 16, okay, 20, 24, 28 to 32. And then over here, going to where it says 1 again, 64ths, all the way up to 64ths. Now, in general, just common everyday usage, really the only one you're going to be using is really the 16th side. So this is the side rule that you're going to be using most heavily. Eighths maybe, but definitely the 64ths and 32nds. Those are really intended for like machinist use. For everyday metal fabrication, welding use, the 16ths are really more than enough. So don't worry about the other sides. You do want to know that because when you order these things, they do give you a choice of different rules, and some go up to the crazy divisions up to like 1/128ths, which I don't even know how you could see that without a magnifying glass. So do check that. You can see here the tightening screw is nice, a nice knurled machined part right here. It feels good in the hand. And one big reason is why would I want to buy a really expensive combination square? Is also forged hardened steel. versus say a cheapo aluminum one is feel. This is all very, very smooth. It feels good in the hand. It feels good using it all day long. It slides easily. The cheaper ones have a lot of sharp edges. They don't move very, very well. They hang up. They're not finished as well, and that can become very frustrating. And also sharp edges that, ow, you know, bite your fingers. It becomes very tiresome after a while. So let's take this off because we'll talk about this later. Let's look inside. So inside of your square, the thing which really gets most new people is, if you look inside of here, you can see there's a little tab sticking out right there. Now, that little half moon shaped part right here, that's what rides in the groove. A lot of times when people take this off, new people, this thing does spin around. So it gives you the option of choosing which scale you want closest to the surface to read, okay? This spins around, they can never get them back in. So what you need to do is you have to make sure you loosen this enough that you can get it into the groove and slide it through and then tighten it up. These are also consumable. So sometimes when people rough, these break. These are replaceable. So that little special part there, this knob, there's a spring in there as well. All of this is replaceable. You have to make sure though you get the correct one. Different manufacturers, they're different shapes, they don't all go together. This is a Starrett, which is a very old legacy brand. In fact, they're the company that designed the original combination square, so they have really good knowledge of how to make them. These do wear out. This is designed to wear out. This is softer than the rule, so this is designed to wear out rather than the rule. And when they wear out, you buy a new one and away you go. So we'll look at the use of this a little bit later. So right now, here's the square. So we have our rule and we have our head and the face right here. We have a face right here which allows us to do 90 degrees. And we have a face here that allows us to do 45 degrees. And these are very convenient because they're among the most common demarcate measurements of angles that we're going to be using in fabricating stuff. Now, when we use this, we really want to make sure that this face is riding up against the surface, okay? This is why hardened face is important, because you're going to be doing this a lot. If it's soft aluminum, it's going to wear and soon it's going to get a groove in it and it will no longer be accurate. So this rides along, and then I can scribe down my measurements on this side, not over here, over here. I want to always make sure this is not like that. I see students doing this all the time. Oh, I'm measuring, you know, I'm only measuring 3 inches, so I only need to go here. If that's the case, loosen the nut, you slide it up to where you see 3 inches, you can see right there, up to the 3-inch line, tighten it. Now I'm at 3 inches right there. You see? And I can mark it off. Now this is a soapstone right here, and you can use a pencil, a Sharpie, what have you. But with a soapstone, which is really one of the most common ways to mark up measurements on steel, notice the way it's sharpened. You see, I have it ground at an angle just on a grindstone or even angle grinder. Flatten this side, angle on this side, okay? The flat side is what's going to go up against the rule, okay? That's important, not the angle, the flat. And you want to make sure this has a good sharp point on it. When it gets dulled, go sharpen it again, okay? So if I'm making a measurement, say 3 inches on here, okay? Go here, mark my line. As you can see, there's 3 inches right here. From here to here is 3 inches, and it's going to be very precise. If I need to make a line 3 inches all the way across here, set my rule here, put the flat up against here, make sure this is riding on here flat, okay? And just run it down, turn it over, finish the rest. I've got my 3-inch line going all the way across, and very easy, very, very simple. If I go over here like this, now I have a perfect 3-inch square right along the end over there. Now, very often you can find these used at tag sales and used metalworking equipment online. These are very sturdy tools. These are designed to last a lifetime and beyond. I have several of these, and my oldest one dates back to the 1920s, and I used it for many years on the job, and I still use it. It'll outlive me and go to somebody else. So how do I know if it's a good one? Now, there's an easy way to check, like how do I know this square is good? Now, of course, these are not indestructible. They're very strong, but they can get damaged. The easiest way is set this out to like 6 inches, 8 inches, a good distance. Put it up against a surface, a nice flat surface. Mark a line like that. Okay, flip it over, okay, and make a second line right next to the first one. Take a look at them. If this has been dropped really hard and gotten bent, which does happen, it's rare, but it does happen, these two lines will no longer be parallel. You will see them, a deflection in there. So that's the way that you can tell if the square is good. So if it, say, drops really hard and you're like, oh boy, I hope it didn't get bent, this is how you check. If it comes out right, you know you're good. Also, a way to tell if you buy a really cheap one, these are aluminum. I think this will be much more subject to bending if it gets dropped. You definitely want to check these. Okay, so that's the 90-degree side. Now here's the 45-degree side. So over here, clean that a little better. This allows me to go up against the surface and quickly mark out a 45-degree line really fast. Boom, there we are. So very convenient if you're making gussets or taking the corners to make an octagon or something like that. Now, when we're measuring, let's say I need to cut this plate in half, let's say, okay? So I'm gonna check how long this plate is. So I'm gonna put my square up against here, or even I can just take my edge right here, okay? Put it up against here, and let's see, I got 10 inches, okay? 10 inches long, so I know that 5 is half. So I'm gonna set this to 5, over here. There we go, I have a 5-inch line here. This is gonna be my cut line, okay? Now, very often we might be working with another person. Or even ourselves, how do we tell someone where we want to cut the This is an important thing, okay? So we have a line. Now we need to tell people which side of the line we're cutting. So by convention in shops, what you do is you put an X on the side where you want the saw blade to cut. So this is the piece we're keeping, this is our drop. Because every saw or plasma cutter or oxyacetylene torch is going to cut out some material. You're gonna lose something. A saw blade is 1/16 of an inch. If it's a torch, it could be an 1/8 inch or even bigger. You're losing material. So you gotta make sure you tell people which side you're cutting on. Always put an X. Okay, whichever side you want the cut to be, that's where the X goes, and that tells the person, okay, this is where I'm gonna cut. So when we're laying out parts, always remember to do this, because you never know if you might be pulled off a job and someone else takes over your job, or let's say you call in sick and now someone else has to jump in on your job and pick up where you left off, and they need to know if you laid out things well. Okay, I'm cutting here. Here's where I cut, and I can continue. If you don't, it leaves an enormous amount of confusion, and we cannot have that. So whenever you're laying out, be very clear where your cut is going to happen and where it's going to fall. Okay, very important. So I measured 5 here. Let's say I need to find the center of this thing. Come over here. There's my center, 5 in, 5, there's the center of my plate. So this is an incredibly useful tool that with this we can build anything, any machine, vehicle, a building, This is really our starting point. Now, there's the centering head, which we'll look at in a moment. There's also like a protractor, which can be for other angles. Though, even though I have one, don't really use it too much. It's rather large, so it can be kind of cumbersome. It's good for big things, but doesn't really work for small things. Though some square sets come with it, and if you want, you can order one too. So we need to make sure that this face is always against the material, always can slide cleanly, which is a big reason why you want to make sure your edges are free of dross or any sharp bits that can hang up. So remember, break all edges. That means your square can slide along nice cleanly and doesn't get hung up on stuff. Make sure it's flat, make sure it's not sticking up. It's flat against the surface. Here and here, your square isn't up like that. It's nice and flat. So you can measure off here, you can measure off the top over here, along this way, and I can measure down this way. Another thing the square can do, as you saw with the level, if I put this, say, here on the surface like that, now I can see if this is level. So I can use this for a level using this face. Let's imagine this is standing up, okay? If I put this against the side here, I can look at the level, put this against like a wall or a column, and I can check if that column is level. So extremely useful. Just by itself, you can measure, lay out a part, install it, and level the part, all using this one tool. So very, very, very useful. I can do this. Here, again, I can check for level. I can measure the height of things off of here if I need to by putting it flat. And our face here, because this is a precision ground surface, which means we can trust this. This is absolutely straight. These edges are absolutely square. I can use this to check how flat is this plate. I can check along the surface, different directions. If I see light coming underneath, I know this is not flat. So this has multiple uses for us that can help us really do our jobs very, very well. So this is probably, or I say traditionally, it's the first tool fabricators buy, would be a good square. And you want to get a reputable one, a reputable known company that makes good products. So Starrett's a good one, Mitsutoyo, Brown and Sharp, though I don't think they're in business any longer. But get a good one. You want to get forged steel. They do make cast ones, but the cast ones, again, castings can be fragile and can break if dropped quite harshly. So spend the money on a good tool and it will serve you in your lifetime. Now, let's change this. So I'm going to undo this, slide this out. Now I'm going to take this, slide my rule in. Can be a little tricky, which is good. You don't want this to fall out, so there we go. Okay, now we're in. It is hard to do intentionally so that you have a good secure connection. Now, if you tighten it up and you do this, and you can feel play in there, that means that this is worn and you do need to change it, okay? So if you do feel play in there, it's no good. So now, what does this funny looking thing do? So, round objects. The centering head allows you to find the exact center of a round object, okay? Which is really, really, really important, and can be incredibly useful on the job because not everything is going to be square or rectangular. So I make several marks on the surface like this, and I can find right there, that's going to be the center of this round object. Very useful. And also another one is, I can use it to find the distance. Let's say I want to go 1 inch in. So I can set this on the edge of my object, set my rule to just touch the edge right there. Okay, it's a about right. Now, okay, I can make marks on here that are going to be exactly 1 inch in, just like that. Now, of course, not the most, not super precise, but it'll do if you need to get the job done. It can help you get things done. So centering head is really useful for laying out the center of a round object, and you got to drill through there, do a plug weld in the center of something. Where's the center? This will help you find it. So centering head is very useful. It's a nice feature to have. You may not always use it, but when you do, it's greatly appreciated. And it has really, it's a one function tool really. It can also be put vertically like that, like this, straight down. And this can also be used to find, like, say, the center of a pipe or something like that. Center only have a pipe on a mark on, it can stand up this way. So again, it has multiple uses. So that's just a quick rundown on use of a square. And again, all these faces are exactly 90 degrees. So this can be used, say, to check the inside of a corner that you're tacked together. You can check in different directions to make sure if this fits in there, it's a perfect 90-degree corner. It touches all 3 of these faces, you're good. So very useful for layout, checking your work, and you always want to do that. So when we're laying out our parts, we want to use the measure our parts, cut our parts, tack them together, and then go back, check again with a good measuring tool like a square, and if the measurements are confirmed to be correct, then we can weld it out. But you always want to double check your measurements, always. And like the old saying is, measure twice, cut once, measure twice, weld once. So it's very important. So that's it.